Tonight on 24, Islamic Republic attacks on UAE and Oman, coinciding with a rapid escalation of tension in the Persian Gulf. America says it has sunk 7 Iranian boats. The IRGC has warned that no vessel has the right to pass through the Strait of Hormuz without permission. The killing of protesters continues in Iran, with the execution of 3 prisoners linked to the January protests. The judiciary announced the execution of 3 more individuals at Vakilabad prison in Mashhad. And the European Political Community Summit in Armenia, focusing on regional threats. The British Prime Minister warned about increasing security threats from Tehran.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Hello, and good evening to Iran International viewers in Iran and around the world. With a sudden escalation of tension in the Persian Gulf, just minutes ago, the U.S. president wrote on Truth Social that 7 Iranian boats, which intended to attack civilian ships, were destroyed. Donald Trump also said that the Islamic Republic has fired upon ships from other countries, including a South Korean cargo ship, and suggested that South Korea also joined the Project Freedom mission, a provocation, it's been said, that Trump intends to use to ensure the security of ship passage in the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates also said an hour ago that it had intercepted and neutralized Iranian drone attacks and 4 cruise missiles. Oman also reported that a building in the north of the country was targeted, resulting in 2 injuries. My colleague Samira Garai has joined us from the White House. Samira, I think it wouldn't be unfair to say that the ceasefire has practically ended.
With the attacks the Islamic Republic has carried out, both on U.S. warships and on an American commercial vessel, and also what it did in relation to the UAE Arab Emirates and a residential building in northern Oman, it can be said that the ceasefire has clearly been violated by the Islamic Republic. They sent 4 cruise missiles towards the UAE Fardad. It's not clear which emirate they were targeting. The UAE's air defense managed to repel 3 of these 4 missiles, and 1 missile landed on the water surface. We know that Israel helped the United Arab Emirates quite a lot during the intense 5-week war. Reports even came out indicating that they provided a crucial portion of their Iron Dome technology to the UAE. The ongoing military and intelligence relationship between Israel and the United Arab Emirates remains exceptionally close. Just today, too, we heard that these incoming missiles were successfully repelled with the help of advanced Israeli military systems. And, well, moving on from these recent missile, drone, and cruise missile incidents, we also had a concerning drone attack targeting the strategic Fujairah region. The Islamic Republic attacked Fujairah's vital oil facilities with an armed drone. A very large and devastating fire subsequently broke out there. During this event, 3 Indian nationals were injured. Furthermore, an Emirati tanker positioned in sovereign Emirati waters and docked in an Emirati port was similarly attacked by the Islamic Republic, even before all these incidents occurred. So we are officially talking about 3 separate incidents, which constitute distinct attacks against the United Arab Emirates. We should also add similar aggressions toward Oman. And regarding the United States itself, what CENTCOM has recently published indicates that American forces were also attacked, and America forcefully responded. The direct result of this clash was the decisive sinking of multiple IRGC speedboats. The number 6 had initially been announced to the press, and then the president himself specifically announced the number 7. Right now, we genuinely do not know how these sudden military clashes ultimately ended, or whether they are still actively ongoing or not. But Mr. Trump recently came out and had a very direct conversation with Fox News. And, there he specifically said that if the Islamic Republic actually wants to fire at all of America's military assets located within the region, whose critical job it is to implement Project Freedom, then Iran will definitely be wiped off the face of the earth. This is what he verbally brought up with the Fox reporter. He himself later came and wrote something on social media. In his writing, there was no mention of another military attack on the Islamic Republic. He says that tomorrow morning, the Secretary of War and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are supposed to hold a press conference. From the Ministry of Defense, we haven't received any points or announcements about this yet. He says they hit South Korea. He says traffic there is still flowing. It's not threatening the Strait of Hormuz. But the point is, two American commercial ships flying the American flag passed through the Strait of Hormuz, and it seems that really impacted all these tensions. CENTCOM talked about this successful passage. They came and said that we're providing new routes to tankers and commercial ships so they can safely pass through routes where we know there are no mines. And our presence also won't allow the Islamic Republic to carry out attacks. And from there, oil prices came down a bit, which then, it seems, these tensions escalated sharply as a result.
Thank you, Samira Darai, for your live reporting with us from the White House in Washington, D.C. Behnam Taleblu, Senior Iran Program Manager at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, has also joined us from Washington. Mr. Taleblu, it seems dangerous tensions have flared up again, and the war has practically started once more. Do you think the conflict will remain at this current level, limited to just a few missiles and drones, or will we likely enter a full-blown regional war in the coming hours?
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to speak today, Fardad Khan. Look, establishing a ceasefire and subsequently violating a ceasefire are simultaneously a calculated political decision and a strategic military decision. Right now, we are rapidly moving towards officially violating the ceasefire agreement. This is especially evident since the Islamic Republic with these four drones, with these four cruise missiles and this one specific drone, plus that recent attack on civilian residential areas in Oman, seems to have clearly and undeniably violated it. But as for exactly how America will retaliate, how the UAE government will execute its own retaliation, and whether it will try to react below the devastating level of full-scale war, the situation remains unclear. We will simply have to wait for a clear answer for another 24 hours, looking closely to traditional news media broadcasts and even real-time social media platforms for any breaking policy updates.
You mentioned social media, and actually some de facto spokespeople for the UAE, meaning those who aren't in the government but have close ties, are publishing words like 24, which indicates the next 24 hours. We know that Abu Dhabi's relations with Tehran have been increasingly damaged during this war. It seems that the UAE has even largely separated its path from other GCC countries. Leaving OPEC and OPEC Plus might have been one of the signs. Do you think the renewed start of war this time will likely be a three-part coalition, and will the UAE also join?
It's possible, and even if it doesn't officially join, it's exactly a new front against the Islamic Republic in the region, and an example of a new order in the region, an order that more or less, after October 7th and through Israel's military and political victories against the axis of resistance and these other quasi-terrorists of the Islamic Republic, we've been gradually reviewing in the media in the region and on the ground. But right now, regardless of any direct UAE military intervention in the conflict, the Islamic Republic, through this renewed and deliberate targeting, has clearly tried to undertake a calculated punitive operation against the Emirates. In my opinion, this aggression is not merely a reaction to the UAE's regional political stances, or the looming possibility that it might officially join the war. Rather, it also serves as a severe form of political punishment, specifically aimed at retaliating against their participation in the Abraham Accords. Secondly, their objective is to thoroughly destroy what we witnessed during the intense 40-day war, specifically aiming at the complete destruction of the prosperous Dubai model for the broader region. I believe this is because the Islamic Republic, through its coordinated attacks against the UAE, is strategically attempting to open a new front, directly targeting the vital economy and energy supplies of the West.
The Islamic Republic might not have much to lose, but the UAE hosts many global citizens. International investments is very close to mainland Iran, and it's true that it has a very strong economy, but at the same time, it's fragile. How much do you really think Emiratis will be willing to bear the cost of a full-blown war with the Islamic Republic, considering the weaknesses they have within their country?
Honestly, there might be a notable gap or a complex difference here between the government's stance and the general public, as well as between the immigrants and native citizens residing in the UAE, just as, noticeably, there might be a distinct difference between those who are strictly security and politically oriented in Abu Dhabi and those who for years have been inclined towards pragmatic appeasement and economic give and take with the Islamic Republic in Dubai. But right now, there is simply no way out of the current regional deadlock except by pushing directly through the deadlock itself, in my opinion. And I think that among these Persian Gulf countries, the UAE has recognized and understood this vital reality first and foremost.
Thank you, Behnam Taliblu, Senior Iran Program Manager, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Today's clashes intensified at a time when just an hour before, the IRGC Navy had announced a new area under the control of the Islamic Republic's armed forces in the Strait of Hormuz. The Revolutionary Guard has said this area will be from the south of the line between Mount Mubarak in Iran and south of Fujairah in the UAE, and from the west between the end of Kesh Island in Iran and al-Quwain in the UAE. Farzin Nadimi, a senior research fellow for defense and security affairs at the Washington Institute, joins us from this city. Mr. Nadimi, could you translate this for us, that this relatively large area isn't just that narrow strip between Iran and Oman itself? I mean from the south, from al-Quwain to this side of the Sea of Oman in Fujairah, UAE. They've drawn a straight line to mainland Iran. What does it mean? What message is it sending to the world, to the United Arab Emirates, and to Oman?
Well, this is exactly the critical maritime area operating under the direct control of the IRGC Navy's 1st Naval District from Bandar Abbas. This specific jurisdiction primarily includes the highly sensitive Strait of Hormuz area. From then on, moving outward from its eastern side, the maritime territory is, so to speak, placed under the operational control of the traditional Navy, or rather, the regular Army Navy forces. And from this side, moving further to the west, the waters are also systematically divided into several different operational sections. Each of these specific zones is controlled by a designated part of the IRGC Navy from those established IRGC Navy regional areas, directly starting from the 5th Naval District, or that, so to speak, Nazat region, which encompasses those 3 strategic islands. This specific part that you just mentioned, and by that I mean this distinct maritime line that originates from the east, starting from Mount Mubarak and stretches across the water to end at Fujairah, alongside the corresponding line on this side that extends from Keshem Island to al-Quwain, perfectly matches some of the official navigational maps published early this morning. However, a significant discrepancy arises when it comes to the intercepted radio communications. The audio messages that the IRGC Navy officers seem to have repeatedly broadcast over the open radio channels for passing commercial ships actually provided a completely different navigational bearing. Instead of the expected coordinates, they explicitly spoke of Hengam Island and Mina al-Sak, which points to a notable inconsistency between the visual charts and active operational instructions. Differs a bit from this line and is a few miles to the west. It's the distance and difference between the west of Kesh Island and Hengam Island. Now, it's not exactly clear why this difference exists. Do parts of the IRGC Navy think that's their control area? Or, well, anyway, the detailed report that came in yesterday indicated that the IRGC Navy had issued a directive telling all commercial and private ships present in the Ras Al Khaimah port to immediately evacuate that area and move toward the west. This urgent order was given because this strategically vital maritime area is going to become, so to speak, what they call a no-fly zone in the sky, as well as a prohibited navigation zone on the water. Analysts suggest that maybe by doing this, they want to significantly reduce the sheer number of vessels in that congested area, so they can maintain a much better unobstructed view. Consequently, those IRGC radars that want to have a clear view from coastal areas or surrounding islands will, so to speak, experience far less electronic clutter and interference. By securing strategic vantage points, these forces operate with a significantly better view, allowing them to effectively target passing commercial ships and possibly American destroyers or Allied vessels scheduled to leave the area under strict U.S. military guidance. In a closely related development, a significant maritime incident occurred earlier today. According to an official report by CENTCOM, 2 American Arleigh Burr-class destroyers entered the strategic waters of the Persian Gulf. However, Iranian authorities vehemently denied this movement. Furthermore, the Iranian Army, Navy, claimed they actively fired shore-to-sea missiles at these vessels, an assertion the United States immediately and firmly denied. And on the other hand, it is widely reported that these 2 U.S.-flagged commercial ships exited the highly volatile area from the Strait of Hormuz under strict control. Now, whether it was a physical escort or sophisticated remote guidance isn't exactly clear. They navigated this route under dangerous circumstances, where there was still still active incoming fire, involving both missiles and armed drones. Admiral Brad Cooper also mentioned in a detailed official statement that at least 2 missiles, or perhaps several missiles and drones, were deliberately fired at both the commercial ships and the accompanying American warships, and they were promptly engaged. I mean, it is quite evident that the IRGC and the Army Navy actively try to completely challenge this strategic maritime movement, which has been officially named Project Freedom.
Mr. Nadimi, the geopolitical relationship between Iran and the UAE had already become deeply tense, especially during the course of this war. But now, in these past few hours, official statements coming out from the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs, prominent figures like Anwar Gargash, and even unofficial spokespeople, I mean those social media personalities who usually reflect the Abu Dhabi government's strategic narrative, have increasingly adopted very harsh rhetoric against the Islamic Republic, considering these alarming shifts. Do you think a direct confrontation between Iran and the UAE will be inevitable in the coming hours and days?
Yes, I strongly believe that in the coming hours, we will witness a significant escalation of tension between the United States and the Islamic government. This rapidly unfolding situation will probably involve Israel very quickly as well. At this highly volatile stage, it appears that the United Arab Emirates will also play a crucial defensive role. They will undoubtedly focus their efforts on proactively defending their major cities and vital economic facilities from any regional fallout. But I strongly believe it will also play a critical offensive role. The UAE Air Force aircraft have already demonstrated their capabilities, just like when they decisively carried out an attack on Lavon Island on the very last day before the ceasefire was implemented. I think they will undoubtedly conduct more targeted attacks in close coordination with US military forces in the region. Naturally, this strategic shift will cause the overall level of direct conflict between Iran and the UAE to rise significantly. This escalation is notable, even though, during the intense 39-day war, a massive number of weapons, I mean even more than were directed at Israel, including advanced ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones, were fired towards the UAE. And this defensive operation was a notable success, where the UAE, using advanced US-made systems it already had, alongside specialized defense facilities it received from Israel, and possibly with the tactical help of Ukrainian experts, managed to neutralize a significant portion of these incoming threats. However, it can be expected that this time, the IRGC will focus much more aggressively on the UAE and attempt to sever the UAE's vital oil export routes. We even saw a recent alarming explosion in Fujairah, situated right within that critical maritime export area of UAE oil infrastructure situated outside the strategic Strait of Hormuz, an incident which now appears to have been a carefully coordinated drone attack.
Mr. Nadimi, currently certain Emirati media outlets are echoing aggressive rhetoric, much like hard revenge, directed at the Islamic Republic. As we know, the UAE and Iran also share a long-standing territorial dispute concerning the 3 Persian Gulf islands. Considering the current geopolitical climate, how likely do you think it is that the UAE will use this opportunity of escalating tension to physically occupy these islands?
Well, it is quite possible that if the regional situation really gets to a critical point where CENTCOM decides, with direct guidance from the White House, to conduct a major amphibious operation in the Strait of Hormuz, they will occupy the island and take full control of it to strictly ensure freedom of navigation, because we know that these islands directly overlook vital international shipping lanes. There really needs to be some kind of reliable security control established over them. Consequently, it is not unlikely that the UAE might use this unprecedented opportunity and try to finally occupy those 3 disputed islands it historically claims. But ultimately, I think that whether the United or the UAE want to make a concerted effort regarding the occupation of the disputed islands, and more importantly, perhaps even maintaining long-term control over them, it would be considered a very serious regional escalation. Consequently, one can expect that from mainland Iran, particularly from the Revolutionary Guard, severe retaliatory attacks and swift reactions would emerge. Anyway, the complex issue of local resistance on the islands themselves is also a completely separate and challenging matter to consider. The primary issue at hand is that this development will inevitably lead to a severe escalation of the ongoing war in the region. Consequently, one can reasonably expect that more effort will be made by the Revolutionary Guard to aggressively attack not just the critical economic infrastructure of the UAE. Furthermore, they will undoubtedly try to target the commercial zones, vital supply chain companies, and probably heavily populated urban centers of the UAE more frequently. At this critical juncture, it remains to be seen whether the current number of UAE missile interceptors will actually be sufficient position to form an adequate defense line against the Revolutionary Guard's relentless incoming launches. Alternatively, we must consider if they should, alongside the strategic efforts of the United States and Israel, undertake a substantially more intense offensive military action so they can effectively stop these dangerous attacks from occurring inside Iranian territory.
Thank you, Farzin Nadimi, Senior Research Fellow for Defense and Security Affairs at the Washington Institute. In these past few minutes, Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, has reacted to Iran's attacks on the United Arab Emirates. I'll read part of the European Commission President's statement. It says that today, our partner, the United Arab Emirates, has once again been targeted by brutal missile and drone attacks from Iran. I express my full solidarity with Mohammed bin Zayed, the people of the United Arab Emirates, and our partners across the Middle East. These attacks are unacceptable and constitute a clear violation of sovereignty and international law. Security in the region has direct implications for Europe. We are seeing the first messages of support from the European Union for their strategic ally in the Persian Gulf region, the United Arab Emirates. Also, at today's European Political Community Summit in Yerevan, Armenia, leaders from nearly 50 countries, including EU and NATO officials, discussed global security issues, including threats from the Islamic Republic. At this summit, European leaders also described Trump's sudden decision to withdraw thousands of American troops from Germany as surprising, but a sign of the need for Europe to increase its responsibility in the security domain. At this summit, the British Prime Minister also said that the war in Iran and Ukraine has led to an increase in proxy attacks by the Islamic Republic and Russia on the streets of Britain.
In the United Kingdom, if you look at the forecast for the economy today versus 3 or 4 months ago, you will clearly see that the nation is in a completely different, far more difficult place. This is a strikingly similar story across all European countries right now. Yet the impact of the war is not just economic. On the very streets of the United Kingdom and other nations, we have witnessed dangerous proxy attacks directed by Iran and Russia. Similarly, we have seen an increase in hostile cyber attacks. This is not a remote issue. It is undeniably real.
Roger McMillan, an expert on security and terrorism issues, is with us from London. Mr. McMillan, thank you for accepting our invitation. As the British Prime Minister also mentioned, it's clear that even European officials, British officials, know how important the threats from the Russian Federation and, what's more important, for us, the Islamic Republic, are on European soil. But what practical steps do you think Europeans have taken, can take, and should take to counter these threats?
Thank you very much indeed for having me on tonight, Fardad.
خیلی متشکرم از دعوت شما فرداد. سوال خیلی جالبیه، سوال خیلی خوبیه. در حال حاضر اتحادیه اروپا داره برنامه‌هایی رو تدارک می‌بینه که وقتی که تنگه هرمز بالاخره باز بشه ببینن چه کار میخوام بکنن. امروز طبیعتا پرزیدنت ترامپ پروژه موسوم به آزادی رو اعلام کرد که خب طبیعتا جمهوری اسلامی الان کنترل اون رو در عهده داره. با شدت و حدت گزارش‌هایی بوده که 2 کشتی آمریکایی امروز از تنگه رد شدن و البته آمریکایی‌ها انکار کردن که ایرانی‌ها حمله کردن به این کشتی‌ها. در صورت همونطور که نخست وزیر بریتانیا، رئیس جمهور فرانسه اینکه چه کار میتونن بکنن باید منتظر ماند و دید.
It seems that the strategic cooperation and partnership that the United States had with its European partners, especially with Britain, has faded compared to the past. There are even tensions, from the withdrawal of American troops from Germany to the rhetoric between President Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. How much do you think these historic strategic partners across the Atlantic can count on each other, or are they pursuing 2 different paths for the security of their interests in the region?
فکر میکنم سفر اعلی حضرت چارلز به آمریکا تا حدی هدفش این بود که این به اصطلاح رابطه ویژه‌ای که بین آمریکا و بریتانیا هست رو تا حدی ترمیم کنه. در حال حاضر بله یک مقدار اختلاف منافع هست بین منافع آمریکا و اروپایی‌ها از سوی دیگر، اما در نهایت وقتی که نگاه میکنیم به مثلا مسئله خارج کردن 5000 نیروی آمریکایی از آلمان، این همیشه بخشی از برنامه‌هاشون بود. بله، تهدیدهایی شده، صحبت از کاهش بیشتر نیروها شده در اروپا، اما بخشی از استراتژی بلند مدت آمریکا بوده است.
Thank you very much. Roger McMillan, our esteemed expert on global security and terrorism issues, joining us today live from London. Simultaneously with the escalation of tensions in the region, the Islamic Republic continues the hasty execution of protesters inside Iran. According to the judiciary, Mehdi Rasooli, Mohammad Reza Miri, and Abraham Dolatabadi, 3 prisoners linked to the protests, are individuals who were executed an hour ago in Vakilabad prison in Mashhad. Iran International's investigations also show that since March 17th, at least 28 political prisoners, including 13 of those arrested during the protests, have been executed. Jaber Rajabi, a political analyst, has joined us. Mr. Rajabi, in these complex regional circumstances, why do you think the Islamic Republic has increased executions so much?
Greetings. Fear, terror. When regimes are falling, they're very loud, they scream a lot, and they'll do anything to survive. We're seeing a clear example of it, right? Today, well, we saw the situation in the UAE, which serves as a prime example of it. For 40-something years, the door was wide open for the Islamic Republic there. It recently took aggressive actions because it's falling. It's desperately encroaching there to maintain relevance. But regarding the complex issue of Iran, well, the Islamic Republic fundamentally knows this reality well. It recognizes that it's undeniably true that sustained foreign attacks and external pressure have severely weakened its foundation, if I may say so in my opinion, in parentheses, leaving it incredibly vulnerable. Before, we were dealing with a massive repressive regime, an undeniably murderous regime. Now, we're dealing with a much smaller, yet still murderous group. This means their core base has significantly shrunk. However, because this faction feels its inevitable downfall is very close, it acts out. Forget about all these loud, intimidating noises. While it is true that they've temporarily silenced the people's voices and are now aggressively raising their own to project strength, behind the scenes, I think sheer terror is widespread among their ranks. The very fact that every single night they desperately try to bring out their few remaining supporters proves their deep underlying panic. At the same time, they're starting a massacre with blind executions, arrests, and the likely elimination of opponents, because right now we lack direct contact with Iran. It is truly difficult to fully grasp the horrifying scale and horrifying extent of these ongoing crimes. Ultimately, this desperate brutality just goes to show that for anyone or anything else, it is the Islamic Republic itself that is intensely feeling the paralyzing fear of its own collapse and the undeniable danger of falling from power. And much like the regime is constantly trying to maintain its precarious foothold on the global stage through the abhorrent practice of political hostage-taking, it also desperately wants to buy itself a bit more time by instilling widespread terror with these senseless, blind crimes against its own citizens.
But this terror has only worked for the Islamic Republic up until now. Isn't it true that with these unprecedented killings during the January protests, with these very executions, how much do you think it can, at least domestically, contain any new protest before it even gets a chance to form?
You are absolutely right. A harsh reality is, we have to admit, the Islamic Republic blatantly committed severe crimes right in front of the watching world and temporarily bought itself some precious time. But when you violently press a mechanical string that much from all sides, once that pent-up energy is finally released, it becomes completely uncontrollable. Look, the underlying issue isn't just political suppression anymore. The terrifying thing is that the Islamic Republic is essentially leading its people to a miserable, slow death with absolutely everything it does. I mean, Iran is rapidly turning into an isolated North Korea, and the global community is actively clashing with it. Economically speaking, it is really unclear what is actually going to happen to everyday citizens right now. All of this, you see, is the immense pressure the Islamic Republic is currently putting on its citizens. These very brutal killings, this systemic fear, and this deliberate deprivation of people completely cut off from the virtual space are building a volatile anger. Eventually, the regime will inevitably meet them in the real world, clashing on the streets, sooner or later. later. I genuinely think these compounding pressures mean that once this massive pent-up energy is finally released, their authoritarian methods just won't work for them anymore. Ultimately, this extreme suppression simply won't work because it's reaching a point where people really have no other way. I mean, the Islamic Republic itself is closing every window of hope for people to breathe. When it closes off breathing, it's closing off the future. And on top of that, it's destroying future generations with what it's doing. When this happens, this space for breathing gets closed. When people feel this suffocation so much, it's like someone being choked. Once that energy is released, I don't think it'll work for them this time.
Maybe it can for like a few days, but when you keep 90 million people under this kind of pressure, I think once their energy is released, it'll become a flood that suppressions are unlikely to help with anymore. Do you see any potential, given the heavy cost protesters paid and this current weakening of the Islamic Republic, for a spark for protests to happen again inside Iran, despite the killings and executions?
Yes, I strongly believe that this significant change will happen sooner or later. In fact, I am fully convinced that it will be much sooner rather than later. I genuinely think that this time around, people are prepared to move much further ahead and achieve unprecedented progress. Certain encouraging developments are already being seen all around us. Well, maybe we simply need to follow these emerging signs much more closely and pay attention to the shifting tides. But I truly think that if, for just once in our history, everyone really comes together in genuine solidarity, because the dedicated people already working on the inside are completely united in their vision, and if those of us standing on the outside also join hands with them in full support, the outcome will be absolutely unstoppable. The signs of it. One of the signs that I can really look at and tell you is that there's been a lot of defection within the government. It's increasing at the higher levels. Look, right now, really, first of all, let's just say not all of them are martyrs.
Some fear has caused defection at the top.
I'm not saying the very top level of leadership has completely defected just yet. However, they will certainly be ready to defect when the decisive event happens, exploiting the very fault line that has now emerged within the regime. Mr. Fardad, I'm telling you right now with absolute certainty, at least I know firsthand, that 6 different factions have sent discreet messages to the Americans. At least I know that 6 different groups who were or are currently in the Islamic Republic's government have in various ways sent messages to the Republic, to America, and have actively put themselves forward as viable future candidates. It's true, they haven't publicly come on TV to say, I've defected, but this quiet shift just goes to show that eventually that formidable wall will break. Look at the wall of the hardcore of power. Its first wave was Ali Khamenei, and its second wave was maybe some other key loyalists. Its third wave now reaches these ruthless people who give orders for massacres. When a rift appears among them, they don't defect to join the people. Rather, they are merely looking out for their own survival, future, and escape. But when a significant rift appears among them, this growing rift, that formidable wall of suppression, that you could say that immense pressure of suppression, when it finally jeopardizes that, that is exactly when people can use this opening. They can confidently join hands with those living outside Iran, join hands with the brave people of Iran. And very easily, I think, this can create a genuinely good, effective coordination.
به نظرم این میتونه در حالت یک هماهنگی خوب به وجود بیاد.
The propaganda machine of the Islamic Republic, both domestically and abroad, seems to function relatively well when the casualties were and are by forces opposing the Islamic Republic, including the United States and Israel. And, well, international cooperation also comes with it in many cases, and in some cases it's very conditional. What do you think can be done? What should the opposition, the opponents of the Islamic Republic, do to at least give the same amount of coverage and reflection to these killings that are happening quietly, with less noise, and more slowly inside Iran by the government?
Mr. Fardad, one significant problem that exists right now is that many world media outlets, or at least some of them, see Iran from entirely from the perspective of the Islamic Republic. The most important thing I think the opposition can do right now is challenge this. Look, the situation is profoundly different today, even from before the recent widespread protests. Many countries that previously maintained a neutral stance towards the Islamic Republic, and many that even, actively lobbied for the regime, have shifted. Today, they finally realize that it poses an existential threat to them. This means that the opposition and the people of Iran are finding new allies. They are finding many allies. But the thing is, these connections need to be established when they're real. Understanding, look, one issue that exists. Well, I've spoken with Arab countries. For example, one of the, powerful Arab countries was saying, well, really, right now, for instance, if the Islamic Republic isn't there, who's going to come? What's going to happen? Well, for example, now one group says Mr. Pahlavi, another group says the Prince, another group says Mr. X, but the reality is that because there isn't one voice, a fear arises in the minds of other countries about what's going to happen. But I think the most important thing that can be done is these connections and the fact that, hey, a coalition is going to form, some things are going to happen. I think this is the most important thing that can be done right now. The opposition, everyone in every country should increase their connections. On the other hand, the issue of communication, meaning the internet, is extremely important. I mean, everyone, I think, should make their most important effort right now to ensure people in Iran can communicate online. Because, look, not everyone really has access to satellite, and even those who do have satellite are under a lot of pressure right now. And they don't really know. Maybe they're not very aware of the events unfolding in this state of unawareness. You say it's been successful, but what has it been successful at? It's been successful in the North Korean style of making lies, the sound of lies, louder. I think the most important thing is just this networking, connections, and maybe more solidarity.
Thank you, Jabir Rajabi, political analyst. As Iran's currency surges, the dollar has hit a record 190,000 tomans. Jahani Sanat newspaper reports a sharp decline in purchasing power, with everyday goods vanishing from household baskets. Meanwhile, Sharq newspaper notes Tehran tenants face steep 30 to 40% rent increases, defying government caps. Sharq newspaper also, referring to Tehran residents' concerns about heavy rents, wrote that Ordi Behesht has become the season of dread for tenants, and contrary to the government's set ceiling, rents have practically increased by 30 to 40%. Masume Taherhani, economic analyst, has joined us from London. Miss Taherhani, well, even before the war, we had weapon price increases and a decrease in the value of the rial, Iran's national currency. But it seems that after the war, and especially after the U.S. naval blockade, this intensity has increased significantly.
Exactly right. The factors we're currently seeing in Iran's economy as drivers or main propellers of the dollar exchange rate increase on one hand and inflation on the other, regardless of the structural problems Iran's economy has, are currently those inflationary expectations that are pushing this forward. The naval blockade, lack of exports, lack of dollar inflow into the country is absolutely no joke. And the market is correctly pricing it in because it's sure to see its real effect in the economy in less than 2 or 3 months. That's assuming people can even survive these conditions, and certainly the market closures due to the war meant they couldn't discover real crises. On the other hand, well, they're dealing with a government whose budget deficit is completely evident, and it's moving towards printing more money, and inflation will again show the effect of all of this. And given the very high correlation between Iranian households' livelihoods and the exchange rate, naturally, in the coming months, and perhaps even for some households in the coming week, we will witness very difficult days. And unfortunately, what we're seeing isn't in the nature of solutions or help for the people. It's simply a shirking of responsibility. And a statistic that's very strange to me, why fewer media outlets have paid attention to it, is a resolution that a cabinet passed yesterday announcing that the import rate for livestock inputs will return to 28,500. I mean, this vicious cycle of decision-making within the Islamic Republic, I don't know when it's going to be eliminated. And of course, it goes back to that mafia network that exists and that vested interest. Well, you claimed in January that this supply of essential goods never reaches the final consumer, which is the people. Exactly. This question should now be asked of Mr. Pezeshki and his team. You who chanted slogans, made boasts, and massacred 40,000 people. Why have you returned to the January point? In an economy with terrible inflation, what do these decisions mean other than it's a mafia, where people's lives and livelihoods have the slightest value?
Ms. Tahir Khani, please stay with us. Our audience has sent many reports on the state of livelihoods and unemployment. Let's listen together to some of these trends, which have been reread with the help of artificial intelligence.
I'm a graphic designer, and because of internet outages and restrictions after the recent war, I've become unemployed and no longer have any source of income. It's been a while now that I haven't been able to pay my rent, and to feed myself, my wife, and my 3 young children, I've had to reach out to friends and neighbors and borrow from them. Why do we have to live like a damn the Revolutionary Guard and this anti-national government that with its warmongering has both taken away our security and deprived us of work and income?
With all passenger flights to Kish Island halted, this once lively place has completely gone into a deep coma, and people have no way to earn income. We're barely making enough for rent, so food and other essential stuff is like totally out of the question today. Tragically, many island residents have been forced to leave due to sudden unemployment, steep rental costs, significantly higher food expenses compared to the rest of the country, and even the frightening lack of regular food shipments.
Hello, you're listening to us from Tabriz. I'm a mobile phone shop owner. I'm paying 30 million tomans in rent every month. And the thing is, I'm not even making 3 million tomans in sales monthly. Our situation has gotten really bad. May God help us.
Ms. Tahir Khani sometimes receives these as audio files, social media messages, or Twitter posts, but the reality is, these are people's lives caught up in a complex geopolitical and ideological equation in the Persian Gulf, the Middle East region, and it's a very heavy price that Iranians are paying every day with their very lives.
Exactly. Right. These issues have existed before, and we can say that this naval blockade and a government that is truly broke and can't conduct any exports has just exacerbated the situation. The reality is that even before this issue, people were facing these challenges in much more intensified ways. If we examine the dollar's performance in just the last 2 weeks, it's showing a growth of nearly 20%. And we're sorry to say that this inflation very quickly reaches people's tables. And what people are talking about is, well, regardless of the fact that food item inflation has increased so much that they are constantly sorting, constantly filtering their food basket towards basic needs. And the elimination of quality food will naturally show its effect on public health in a short period. And on the other hand, the housing or shelter problem that most Iranians are currently facing, this too is exactly a structural problem. The housing issue doesn't, at least in the short term, involve the blockade or the dollar issue. But because these issues have existed before, and there's a government that doesn't provide the slightest support to either industries or the people, we're sorry to say that people are alone in these conditions.
Thank you for joining London economic analyst Masume Tahir Khani. In these final moments of the program as we speak, a little after 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:12, President Donald Trump is scheduled to deliver a speech at the White House shortly regarding small businesses. It is believed that he will probably also address the situation in the Iran region and the Islamic Republic's attacks on ships, as well as the United Arab Emirates. Tensions between Tehran and Abu Dhabi have escalated to an unprecedented level in recent hours. The United Arab Emirates announced in the past few minutes that it intercepted and destroyed 15 missiles and 4 drones from Iran today, 3 cruise missiles, 4 drones, and 12 ballistic missiles, which the Gulf Cooperation Council also strongly condemned minutes ago in a strongly worded statement. calling them Iran's irresponsible actions in attacking the UAE. Several neighboring Gulf countries, including Bahrain and Qatar, have officially issued statements in unwavering support of the United Arab Emirates. Emirati officials are continuously issuing statements and social media posts condemning today's Iranian attacks on the UAE. In at least one instance at the Fujairah port, the strikes caused a fire at a vital energy facility. Thank you for watching tonight's 24 program. Iran International's live coverage of the escalating tensions in the Middle East will continue in the coming hours. You can watch this program again later on Iran International's YouTube channel.